Let's move now to Brazil and the inauguration there of its new, though not new to the job, president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, better known just as Lula. Now, it's actually his third term in office, but his first since his imprisonment and subsequent release from prison on corruption charges. Now, the leftist Lula took power after besting the right-wing incumbent Jair Bolsonaro, who has since left, or you could say fled, Brazil for the U.S. And you see the crowds there at Lula's inauguration in the capital, Brasilia. Joining me in studio, our senior correspondent, Bianca Zanini. And Bianca, Brazil can be a country of extremes sometimes, and it's certainly an extreme move from the right. Some might say far right. Bolsonaro to the left. Some may say quite leftist. Lula, but also quite a change and a difference in their attitudes towards Israel, which certainly could impact on Brazil's policy towards the Jewish state.
Absolutely. I mean, Bolsonaro was very outspokenly a supporter of Israel. And at that time, during his presidency, Brazil was really quite isolated internationally, apart from U.S. Under Trump, and then apart from Israel. Now, there's a good chance that Lula is going to try to focus on repairing some of these relationships and getting Brazil back on the international stage, talking to leaders from Europe, Africa, the Americas, and that will be his focus. Now, historically, we know that Lula has been more pro-Palestinian, and he recognized the state of Palestine. He also met with Iranian leaders. There was quite a bumpy relationship with Israel, even though he was the first Brazilian leader in decades to come on a visit in 2010. But that said, times are different now, right? The Lula of 2023 is not the Lula of 2003 when he took office. His team right now is much more diverse, and then of course the world is no longer the same. In the past few decades, in the past decade in particular, the relationship between Brazil and Israel has grown a lot stronger. I mean, we're talking a lot of cooperation on education, on technology, security, on culture, trade. So this is really something that has been building from the ground up. And just because we might see diplomatically Brazil taking a step back, potentially in international fora, it's unlikely to see that strong relationship just crumble because of this. And Lula, you said he is a leftist. He is, but he is much less radical. At least his team seems to be much less radical, and his rhetoric much less radical than before.
We should note, though, that South America is home to some of the countries, the most pro-Palestinian and some might say anti-Israel countries. Venezuela, of course, stands out.
Yes.
But Chile, of course, also has embraced the Palestinian cause, announced recently it's opening an embassy in Ramallah, recognizing the state of Palestine. And Brazilian Jews may feel a little uncomfortable by some of the moves or rhetoric coming out of Lula.
We've got around 120,000 Brazilian Jews in Brazil, and when Bolsonaro came to power, he had the support of the majority of them because of his staunch support for Israel. But that changed over time. I mean, not only did Bolsonaro come out with quite controversial statements about the Holocaust, but also his policies towards minorities, towards the deforestation, how he handled the COVID, really split up the American Jewry. And there's also something about the way that Bolsonaro supports Israel, right? It's very connected to Christian evangelical values, similar to something that we've seen with Trump as well. So I believe that what we're going to see with Lula is something where he might take some symbolic gestures towards more Arab countries, towards the Palestinians, but nothing big changing in the relationship with Israel.